guys, welcome to OCD Real Talk. Today it's just me and Maha. We thought we needed some separate bonding time from people, right? We don't need them. We need our own little chat for a second. So Maha and I want to take a look at relationship OCD, but also a little bit at how it is to have OCD in brown communities. Because because culturally it can vary a little bit with how people experience it and things like that. So so yeah, I Maha, could you like tell me a little bit about like when you started to suffer from OCD and just a little bit about your like background story, and also like where you're from and whatnot, because I think that's important to set up like culturally a little bit as well.
Absolutely. So I am originally from Iraq. I was born in Iraq and I lived in Egypt for 10 years as well and moved
Oh,
to Australia and lived there for another 10 years. So
was
I
it
kind of like experienced
like
both
your family
backgrounds.
was moving and stuff like that?
So we had to move from Iraq because of the war that happened in 2003.
Oh, okay.
So my dad was yeah, like we were forced to leave um, within 2 weeks. So we did, and yeah, we moved to Egypt, and then decided to move to Australia, um, which is really good because I've had like I experienced both world, the Western and the Eastern, and I think mental health wise, especially, it's a big shock for me because where I grew up, mental health or therapy in general isn't as popular or appreciated. So I'm very lucky that I actually experienced OCD in Australia. But that's been said, I still struggled a lot with the fact that I had admitting that I had mental health issues, and especially OCD amongst my family and my brown friends because it's kind of known as like weakness, so you don't really show it or admit it. So when 4 years ago when I had the peak of my OCD, I told my family that I'm seeing a therapist or wanted to see a therapist, and that was definitely a big thing. They were very concerned about me being very weak, being being crazy. They didn't want me to tell people that I'm seeing a therapist because they don't
Yeah.
want people to think I am a crazy person. So going through that was a big challenge for me. Even though they sort of like um, see me go from being really down to better. They just did not want to acknowledge the fact that it's due to therapy and coaching.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that, I mean,
so,
that's a very common thing amongst like a lot of brown people. At least like even if I also don't want to generalize to like all like brown people from like all sorts of like places, but like at least from like the more Asian side of things or the South Asian side of things. Yeah, so I was just saying that a lot of my friends as well don't tell their parents going to therapy. They make up a reason that they're going to see a friend or going for class or something like that. They don't mention therapy at all because it's like I don't know how to explain it to people sometimes. It's not even just about people being against it. It's also that as a concept it does not exist. So to be able
mm,
to like give that concept or introduce that concept from scratch, to be like, oh, this is what happens when there are mental health issues and problems, and this is what you do when you have them. Like that in itself is a challenge itself because it's like completely bringing in something new into their world.
yeah, absolutely. That's another thing is like the fact that mental health is like, what do you mean by mental health? What's the problem? There isn't a problem. I remember like my mom would say to me something like, pray, pray to God. That's it, or some other concept that it's like a superstitious stuff, like you've been I don't know, cursed, or you've been something, I don't
Mm,
know, like some religious stuff. And then she would go out to some experts. They can cleanse my energy or stuff like that.
Because
And it's been approached many times, it doesn't work, but
yeah,
it's
because
still,
for
you know, a
them,
solution.
for them, the only conceptualization of something wrong happening with your body is like health related stuff, like, not like brain related stuff, but just like physical health related stuff. That's the only conceptualization. The rest is like up to spirituality and things like that. So what they can't see is something that they can only tie to religion or religious thought or superstitions. That's all. So that's why it becomes a big challenge for them to even like think about it.
Yeah, because that's what they've been told. That's what they learned their entire life. I think we're really lucky we have the internet. You know, we're more
Yeah.
exposed. I think this generation and the next one's even better because we're more exposed to mental health. We see YouTube videos, TikToks, it's something quick about mental health, and we kind of like it's repeated. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like some members of my family, they still suffer hugely with mental health, but they don't want to admit it, and they don't want to even like try something different. And it really feels sad. It feels upsetting to me seeing it happening and knowing that there is a solution, there is something that can really make them feel a lot better. But sometimes you can't really change people, right?
Yeah, of course, because it's their background. Like for us, it's normal because we've grown up in that environment as well and grown up in that kind of exposure. I think if we had grown up in the same time as them or the same environment, then we probably would be against us as well, and we would be judging our friends as well, who seek mental health help.
Oh, 100%, 100%. I think that's why I think the internet has really made everyone a bit more open-minded to some degree because things are changing quickly and moving quickly. So we gotta have to have that mindset of okay, maybe there's something new. There's always something new. How was your experience with it?
So I am like I'm from a family of doctors, so I guess like doctors are a little closer to like being familiar with, someone's mental
Mm,
state as well. I've also had like, like on my both on my dad and my mother's side, there is a history of depression as well. There's a history of like a little bit with anger as well. So those things have existed on both sides of my parents as well, plus then they are doctors as well. So they're naturally very familiar with, people having mental health problems or family members having mental health problems. So within my household, I would say
mm,
I felt fairly comfortable having these issues or even like bringing it up. I didn't like I'm lucky in that sense that there wasn't any resistance. However, it's not something that I was like my cousins and my like people don't know that I went for therapy or I seeked help. They don't know that, right? Because I think if they and the thing is, I sometimes suspect that maybe some of my family members or cousins have gone for therapy, but they haven't talked about it. Like it's just a suspicion that I have, right? But nobody tells like anyone about it. People keep it a secret because I don't know when it becomes open, then it really becomes open, and then people start to see you differently and whatnot. Um, so yeah, I mean, like I think that for me, like in that sense, at least within my household, it was fairly okay. But then you have to pick and choose who
that's really good.
be are open about this with. Yeah, I mean, when I told my parents that I wanted to go for therapy, they were like, "Yeah, sure. I mean, just let us know and we'll pay for it." And I was like, "Okay, then that's great." I mean, I mean, I completely acknowledge that I'm in a very like very lucky position that way. But that's also in part to the understanding and environment that they've been in from their medical field as well.
Yeah,
So that helps.
yeah, yeah. I think with me, like my dad was like an army officer. His whole life has been just like very strict, like a soldier life.
Mm,
So so to come up to him and tell him I've got mental health issues, it's kind of like what it's like you're not normal, you're not okay,
I can
kind of thing,
imagine. Yeah, yeah,
you
I can
know?
imagine. And I
Yeah.
think like the other thing is that because I've had it with in the family in family history, My parents, in both their relatives, they have seen how much poor mental state has deeply affected people's lives, and how much it has, like, without like having the proper tools for it, how much a weak state, like not weak, sorry, a bad state of mind has really destroyed someone's life, you know. Um, and 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 so I think that's also why they see it as, and they're also someone who, they're also people who have tried to keep up with the times as well as best as they can. I mean, trust me, they're not great at all those things. They're still very traditional in many ways, but like in as much as they can, I think they have tried to keep up with the times as far as, you know, new ways of doing things are there. So I think those little things help. If people are open to those things, then it definitely helps, like, you know, uh, like support each other when there's need.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. Like for me, I like I can't see one person in my family that isn't like doesn't have health issues, mental health issues. Like it's really big from both sides, and like some of their lives been really like destroyed by it. Like my aunt, like she burned herself alive from
Oh,
like depression and mental health, and her life was like horrible. Um, like it's really big, and I like trying to explain that to your parents or your someone that you care about. Like that's why I'm doing it, so I don't repeat those things that happened in the past, or at least try not to.
yeah,
Um, and a lot of it, like if you think about like therapy or coaching, it's like having someone that trains you and helps you to solve problems and think things rationally. It's not just like there's a lot of taboos around mental health, and I think
yeah.
it's also because mental health is in some places have gone a bit extreme, or like a bit too much when it comes to like actually finding an effective treatment. Like
Yeah.
for me personally, like the whole inner childhood thing that did not help with OCD and
Oh,
anxiety.
same. With
Made me more
OCD, it did
angry.
not help at all. Like that was a complete like rabbit hole. And I mean, I went through so many of my past issues and childhood stuff, and this, like, I tried to take apart each and everything that I could. I literally did, and none of that really helped me in any way. And it just,
No,
at some
I
point
don't
it
think
felt
they would help
frustrating.
anyone.
Yeah, it was like, where is, like,
It is.
is there anything left? Is there any rock left unturned? Like, what do I do over here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember like my therapist was trying to help me with going through like being disowned by my family. So she would tell me something like let's picture your family here, like some scenarios, and I want you to be angry and tell them like your anger and stuff. And that just made me more angry. I go home and I'm just like thinking about these things all the time and going through the past and analyzing every word, everything, and you know how like your emotions are exaggerated
And the thing is
as
that,
well.
Maha, think about it. Like, these are also things that, I mean, so obviously there are all kinds of OCD sufferers and all kinds of behavior patterns, but like, a lot of people do keep things bottled up in themselves, and like therapy or coaching is where they kind of like let things out. However, with so many OCD sufferers that we work with as well, one of the most common things that you see is that taking your anger out, taking your frustration out, taking your annoyance out, whatever it is, people are already doing that in their life. People are, in fact, I mean,
Mm,
that's where the compulsive part comes in. People are doing
mm,
that way too much. So, in like doing the same thing with, like, in a professional setting is not something that's going to take anyone forward. Like you said, it's going to reinforce that bitterness as well. And I think that's what it was doing for me as well, because it was reinforcing that, like grudges and, like, you know, bitterness and all these like ill feelings and whatnot that you keep towards family. It was just reinforcing that. And that's what made me frustrated, because I was like, okay, so through this process of learning, like going through my inner child and whatnot, is the realization and conclusion that my family has acted in shitty ways and therefore I need to start distancing myself from them. Like, that doesn't make me happy at all. Like, that's not. That's not the, like, status quo that I wanted to reach. I wanted to work on trying to improve things. But yeah, I was at a loss with that.
Yeah, yeah. And when you have relationship OCD, oof, that does not help as well,
Oh,
because you think that's the pattern you're gonna have to embrace, from now on to feel always better. And the whole venting, confessing, complaining, and wanting your partner to be perfect, wanting your partner to be like, 10 out of 10, and yourself as well, 10 out of 10, with intrusive thoughts and rumination, it just it made me worse. It really did make me worse. Um,
so let me ask you, like,
yeah.
what was, if you had to, like, pick some of the wrong pieces of advice that you followed? And I'm not trying to, like, not saying that specifically from therapy, but generally even from the internet, right? What people advise to you, or what you
Mm.
read on the internet, or someone said to you. What were some of the wrong pieces of advice with relationship OCD that you thought would help you, but they didn't?
Oh, that's a very good question. Um, I think uh, communicating. So there is obviously there's something good to communicating, right? But I think with OCD sufferers, when we hear this word, we think that we have to vent and confess
And talk
24
about each
7.
and
We
every
have to
single
always be
thing.
like, yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, communicating what you feel to your partner, communicating um, the problems or whatever. But when you're going through OCD, a lot of it is it's really exaggerated, and you don't want to be that person who always, complaining, always venting, always. It's not a nice thing to anyone. So that piece of advice was horrible because it made things worse for me.
Yeah,
um,
I think that's for
and
every OCD sufferer, a relationship OCD sufferer. I think because that thing of trying to maintain complete transparency and honesty, like we take it to the next level,
mm,
into the next extreme. Like it's just like then you have to talk about every single thing that comes to your mind and every single tiny nuance and feeling and this and that. Like I've had like and not just in your romantic relationships, but also in your friendships, you start doing that. I've done this so much where I've talked about, let's say, an issue with a friend, and we have sorted things out amongst ourselves, or, like just discuss something, and we've been like, okay, we've discussed it now on and over. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I'd be like, ooh, there's this one emotion that now I'm realizing I did not bring up, or this slight little nuance that I didn't talk about. And then I would bring up the topic again, and that it would be like what, and I would feel frustrated with my own self because it would be like, why can't I leave things to rest? Because in my mind it was like I was constantly keeping track, and that's what my worry was as well, that I don't want my friends or whoever to think that I'm keeping track of their actions, or like I'm like, putting them through some kind of test, or investigating them or something. Like that's not my intention, but that's what it feels like.
yeah, yeah, 100%. That and also like there's that Western concept, I think, which is, it's a bit exaggerated in therapy as well, where if you're having some emotional problems or even OCD, they would tell you like, oh, you have to be respected, you have to have boundaries all the time, you have to be listened to all the time, and if this person doesn't do that, then you have to cut them off your life.
I think
And
I think us,
OCD lashed big time on this one.
like, as I think as brown communities, like we are we're like the classic examples of acceptance of having, like, not having any boundaries. Like even though we want to, but we are not able to. Not having boundaries, keeping people in your life you don't get along with, you'd have big disagreements with, like you can't cut them out. Like it's just not possible. So
Yeah,
it
the cousin
definitely,
that you have to put up with.
absolutely. So like even if I've wanted to apply that advice to my life, it's not applicable in a society like this. It's not, and the only option you have is to adapt and accept. And I think, and from now, from like an OCD standpoint, I feel like that's actually a really great muscle to have. So my ability to have dislikable people in my life
Yeah.
is far greater, and I'm able to tolerate
Or
so much.
situations that you have no control over.
Absolutely.
No, you know what? It's like, no, but you know that. But you know what was really hard for me as well, because I was having issues with my family at that time, and that's when I was my first time I was disowned was at the peak of my OCD. It was a really bad time then. So I was really against the fact that my mom would say something about, or like my cousins. It's like that community I was in. It's like you have to put up with everything that your husband do. You don't have a say in things. You just like, just be there for them, and like everything about them. Very extreme,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then I moved to the Western thing where it's like you have to have boundaries. You have to cut people off your life if they don't do this and that. And I found myself like in the very mental, like dilemma of things being
Yes.
going extreme, and OCD is just latching all over the place.
Yes. And it takes such a like it takes a long time to be on. Like even for me, I think it took such a long time to implement a balance, right? Where I'm not going on the complete extreme route of people railroading over me. And this is the other thing. I think this is important to remember as well. I used to be someone who like easily, let anybody walk over me, right? I was that kind of person. Then through Instagram and all this kind of stuff, even with my therapists, because they were trained in America, right? They were American trained therapists and whatnot. So they were obviously bringing that kind of flavor to their approach as well, which is again inherently not wrong. It's but for OCD
Mm-hmm.
at least, like there's a little bit of a mismatch with the advice because it's very applicable to that side of the world. Over here, like the context of things can be very different as well, right? So then I went to the other extreme of then
Yeah.
creating like very hard boundaries and like distancing away and cutting off and this and that. And so and plus it was also in my mind coming from a place of, oh, I'm someone who has let people walk over me for this many years. Now I need to like be very, strict with my boundaries and this and that. So it took me a while to see that, okay, no, I'm going the other extreme, because my friends also were like, you sometimes become very insensitive. And that wasn't my intention, but I could completely then, when they said that, like, I got to see that, okay, wait, that's not my intention. I don't want to be an insensitive person. But that's how it's coming across, because that's how extreme and strict I'm being with this like newfound advice. So then it was like a balance of being like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, I can draw boundaries, but I don't need to have anyone walk over me, but I can also have boundaries, and there's a middle ground over here that we can do.
Yeah, it's like it's so difficult. I can like think of it like learning a new language. You're
Yeah,
teaching your brain, and you have to repeat things many times, and different scenarios and different way of saying it, different people. It's a whole different language your brain has to take, and it takes really, really time. Like I like when I look back, it's been 4 years since I had OCD, and I remember how much I was rushing. I just wanted to be perfect, perfect. But I'm like, no, that's impossible. Like thinking back, and it's like, why was I rushing so much? I mean, yeah, it makes sense because I was rushing.
yeah,
Nobody
yeah,
wants to feel those feelings. But it makes sense. Like it took me so much time to learn English. It took me so much time to adapt to or learn a new skill. Like you go to uni, you know, the minimum course is 3 years to learn anything
Hmm.
in uni, to get a certificate.
Yeah,
It's like once you compare these things, like, oh, but in one way we're Russian and the other one we're not.
yeah.
We
I
understand it.
I
So you
bring
gotta
the
teach yourself that.
university, I bring the university college example a lot in my calls as well, because when people are feeling after 2 months, they're like, oh, I feel like I will never recover. I'm like, you're trying to pass a course just after reading like 3 chapters from the textbook. You can't. Like, you have to like put in a lot of work. You have to read the entire book, then you have to practice, then you have to reread it. You have to solve questions. Like, there's so much you have to go through to be able to pass the final exam. And even then, you don't ace it. Even then, people get B's and C's in the final exam. So it's a lot of work
Yeah.
in progress. Like, you have to really, really, really properly practice it. But and that's the other thing. I think this is all across like the world, not just like to our part of the world. Where then with mental health, I think sometimes because overall our world is so manufactured and so structured and instant gratification, whatnot, sometimes people feel like they can manufacture recovery just the same, that they can put like all the input in like a factory machine and then they can get the output very easily. But that's not how obviously it works.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it's also like the hardest part is that you gotta have to rely on yourself when you're recovering from OCD. You still have help, which is a lot more than like we've ever had, like the help I got from OCD recovery from Rob. But I think the time what I really felt like I'm recovering truly is when I put the effort myself. I had to really push myself. I had to be like like my own coach, and that was so
Yeah.
challenging because with the internet, oh, I'll just get someone to do it. I'll just get that. I'll just
Yes.
do that, but it doesn't work like that.
No, and you see this in coaching as well. Like people can come in for like several months. Um, but if they're not putting in the effort between calls, then nothing changes for them. And that's where like you have to be, like you said, you have to kind of be your own coach outside of the calls as well. Right? You have to be able to help
Mm.
yourself as well. You can't come in for help and only expect to listen and then be on your way. No, you have to really implement that. And self accountability, that's why it's so important. And I think this especially is important for a lot of like again brown communities to hear as well, because as we've spoken about, like a lot of us are also from families that either are against like mental health help, or they don't just have the conceptualization for it in the first place. And you see this so much, and I see this from people from Pakistan and India writing about this a lot as well, where obviously they're feeling very bitter towards family for not understanding fully or not properly being able to support them.
Mm.
But then in families or in communities or societies where the understanding and like conversation around mental health is not that well developed, especially for you, it's so important to be your own, like rely on your own self only for recovery. You don't need your family to understand it. You don't need to sit your family down and explain your entire OCD cycle to them or your fears or anything to them. Like you can like you can I mean I've done that myself, you've done it as well, and we're not saying from a point of view of, oh, we've done it so you need to do it the same way. Of course, if your family understands and supports you, that's great. I mean, that is a great bonus to have. But also, like my family, yes, they supported me in seeking mental health help, but they have no clue how my OCD cycle operated. Like they don't know what went into it. That
Mm.
was all just me doing it in isolation completely. If they
Mm.
watch my YouTube videos of my recovery journey, they would not recognize what I'm saying, because they would feel like they're like hearing a complete
Yeah.
alien person talk about these things, because they don't know like what's going on in my head.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a really good perspective, right? Because like we come from brown culture, but your family responded differently to how my family responded. And like I see it, like for example, you would probably, if you reflect on it, you'd be like, I'm grateful for that part, like having gratitude for that part. For me, I would be like, if someone who doesn't have access even to like the OCD recovery culture or any that thing, because they have very strict family, I have people like that, and
Yeah.
I would just be like, I'm grateful, at least I still
Yeah.
went for it and I had a little bit more access to it.
I
I think
mean,
gratitude is really, really
yeah,
important here.
and Maha, like think about it. You and I are also very fluent in English as well. That's I feel like that's a luxury as well, because like
Mm,
otherwise, because like for example, the Ellis books are not translated in Urdu, or as far as I know, they're not translated into Arabic either.
no,
Right?
Arabic, no.
I think someone once said there are some like resources of it in Arabic, but yeah, there's no extensive work on it. So we're fluent in English, and therefore we've been able to access these tools and these videos and have these sessions and whatnot. Language is also another thing. Like a lot of people like from where we are not fluent in English either, and the resources are not
Yeah.
available in local languages either. So that's a big plus as well. Like by the also, Ellis books are not available over here in Pakistan, at least, right? I'm assuming they probably are might not be available in Iraq either. right? So for me, like I had to, like, friends who were going abroad or something, I had to ask them to get the books for me. And again, that's also a very like fortunate position to be in, that you have people who are traveling around the world who can get those things for you. Otherwise, I probably would have just not had access to it, right? And these things are, this is absolutely from a gratitude perspective as well. This is absolutely not like a show off showcase over here at all. Like I wish,
Yeah.
I wish that other people, I could somehow translate all of this for other people as well. I wish I could somehow give this knowledge to the people who need it in their own language somehow.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But and the other thing is like it's like when you even when you translate it, right? There's still like you need someone like you, like Rob, like coaches, like actually
Yeah.
know how to explain it to people.
Yes.
You know how to do it because a lot of people just read through it's like, but I'm not what what? That's a whole
Yeah,
foreign concept to me. It will be
exactly.
like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a lot to do in that community and we are so lucky that we are able to recover, able to read and understand and get help. Like that is a huge, huge thing. Like for me, that's a big gratitude. Like even when I'm feeling angry towards my parents for like sometimes when I'm, you know, because I'm being disowned, I still am very grateful that they came to Australia.
Mm,
They tried something different, which allowed me to go study in uni, allowed me to learn English
yeah.
and do all the things that I do now.
No, absolutely. And I think that, and you see this with so many people, again, not discounting that some parents can treat their children in really bad ways as well, not discounting that. But in general, you see how strongly sometimes kids can be very bitter towards their parents. And like, just like really hold a very strong grudge. And it's sometimes heartbreaking to see, because both sides of the party want to get along. They want to see eye to eye. They want to, like, communicate and get along very well. But they are just not able, they, because of whatever happening, they're not able to do that, right? And they hold on to those things, and the thing that's missing over there is perspectives. Like you said, it's not as straightforward as, oh, because your parents like did not treat you well for XYZ thing, therefore it completely nullifies all the opportunities or
Mm-hmm.
all the good, like the good things that they may have done as well. Things are way more complex. Like I am someone who criticized my parents for a lot of things for so long, but definitely I'm also in that boat that now, with having more reflection and more perspective and keeping aside the bitterness lens, is
Mm-hmm.
just having a lot of gratitude for a lot of the things that they did give me as well. you know it's not as straightforward as that.
Yeah, it's not, and also like a lot of people have this misconception, and I myself was guilty of it, of thinking about gratitude as being, you know, you're very like you're not. When people think of it as like, oh, I'm not gonna be improved, I'm not gonna be better. Like, are you
Yeah.
telling me to just be okay with it and that's
Yeah,
it?
also it feels like
It's very
letting.
similar to acceptance, you know.
Yeah, it feels like
It's not
letting people
agreement.
off the hook. It's not letting anyone off the hook, right? You very
Yeah.
properly recognize that someone is in the wrong. At times, people make it known to other people as well that they have done wrong, but it's not indulging in that intense feeling long term. That's what needs to change, because if you're keeping that feeling so fresh in yourself and like not, and wanting to really hold on to it, to be like, no, I want to hold on to this like grudge forever, it, I'm sorry, but you will be unhappy long term then, because it never helps. That it never has
Mhm.
any benefit or use to hold on to that kind of thing for that long.
100%, 100%. And that with also, you know, stopping complaining and whining and train yourself and see the world as there's a problem, there's either solution or there is whining. That's it. Like, what do you want? You know, things
Yeah.
aren't gonna like just like happen to you because you want them to happen to you.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a big realization.
And
Everyone,
again,
I think, needs to really think about that.
We're a classic example of that. Just because you want things, they won't happen that way. Brown parents are just like all
No.
like they're so dismissive of their of their kids a lot of the times, especially like our generation of parents. I feel like now people, I think my cousins and whatnot as parents, they're far more not just lenient. At times they go in the territory of full on spoiling their children, but that's also because we're also from that generation where we had like more strictness involved, I guess. So for us, I think that kind of free hand to the kids feels like spoiling, but who knows, like maybe it's not spoiling. Like, I mean, we have to see really with the passing decade, we'll have to see
Yeah.
how that pans out. But yeah, I mean, for sure, it's good perspective for us to bring into our the way we see things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You still acknowledge it. It's difficult, definitely. It's in some other parts of the world, it's a lot better. In some others, it's not. Nothing about dismissing it. It's definitely hard, and we've been through it. But there is always way around it to
Yeah.
make you feel less miserable, and improve yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Maha, I think this was a good chat in just generally, talking about different things and relating OCD recovery and perspectives to culture. I think that's very important to bring into like the fold of conversation at times, because again, it gets missed of how much it can vary from country to country, really, because the culture of each country is so different. Even within us, like I'm sure, like the culture of like Pakistan and Iraq is like very different as well. How Iraqi
Yeah.
families operate, how Pakistani, like there must be a lot of similarities, yes, but then also a lot of differences too. So yeah, I think this was a good conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for bringing it up. I think that would be really beneficial for a lot of people to hear.
Yeah. Maha, thanks for being here. Let's do this again in the future as well. And I'll see you on another real.
Of course. Thank you, Momin.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.